Imagine checking into a hotel, but there is no one at the front desk. You walk upstairs to room 207. The door is unlocked. Inside, a suitcase lies open on the bed, half packed. A dress is laid out for an evening that never happened. On the nightstand, a newspaper dated October 14th, 1986. The silence is absolute, yet overwhelming. You feel like an intruder. You feel watched. The guests didn't just leave, they vanished. And this is exactly why abandoned hotels affect us more than any other lost place. It isn't just curiosity, it's a glitch in our psychology. Today we are stepping inside the Grand Hotel of the Unknown. We aren't just exploring a building. We are exploring the science of ruin lust, the dread of liminal spaces, and the haunting story of a place where time simply stopped. Welcome to the reality that no one inhabits anymore. Welcome to Fascination reality. Lost places fascinate millions of people, factories, ships, cities. But there is one type of abandoned place that feels different. The untouched time capsule. An abandoned hotel. A place designed for comfort, warmth, and life, now frozen in silence. Why does your brain interpret this decay as disturbing, yet beautiful? Why do these empty hallways make your heart race? Today, we are not just exploring a building. We are exploring what happens inside the human mind when time stops. The psychology of abandoned hotels. Why empty luxury haunts us. Section 1. A sudden departure. Unlike a factory that shuts down gradually through planned layoffs and systematic closures, this hotel feels profoundly interrupted. The scene before us tells a story of abrupt cessation. Tables in the grand dining hall are still set with fine china and silverware, waiting for guests who will never arrive. Beds remain unmade, their sheets twisted and frozen in time, as if the housekeeping staff simply vanished mid-shift. Personal items were never collected. Suitcases sit partially unpacked, toiletries line bathroom counters, and magazines lay open on nightstands, marking pages that will never be finished. This particular arrangement tells a very specific story, one that your brain immediately begins to decode. The human mind is wired to seek patterns and explanations, especially when confronted with evidence of sudden human absence. Was it a natural disaster that forced everyone to flee? A catastrophic financial collapse that happened overnight? Or perhaps something far worse, something we dare not fully imagine? In this particular case, historical records and local documentation suggest a more mundane but equally devastating cause: an abrupt economic shutdown. The owners apparently locked the doors one seemingly ordinary morning, fully expecting to return shortly to resolve temporary financial difficulties. They were convinced that funding would materialize, that investors would reconsider, that circumstances would somehow improve. They never did return. The building was left in a state of perpetual waiting. Without climate control systems running continuously, the building immediately began its slow but inevitable decay. Moisture entered through compromised windows and deteriorating seals in the walls. The cold winter months expanded microscopic cracks in the concrete foundation, creating pathways for water and accelerating structural damage. What was once pristine luxury gradually gave way to the unstoppable forces of biology and physics. Mold crept across expensive wallpaper. Ceiling tiles absorbed water and collapsed. Carpets became breeding grounds for fungi and insects. But this physical decay, dramatic as it appears, is only part of the story. The psychological dimension runs far deeper. Section 2. Why we enjoy ruins. There exists a German word that perfectly captures the feeling this place creates: ruin lust. It translates roughly to finding genuine fascination, and even a strange form of pleasure, in observing decay and destruction. This concept is intimately connected to the medieval artistic tradition of memento mori, which served as a reminder that everything in existence, including ourselves, is fundamentally temporary and destined to return to dust. When you stand in this hotel and observe the peeling paint, the collapsed furniture, and the vegetation reclaiming interior spaces, you aren't merely seeing architectural abandonment. You are safely confronting your own mortality from a comfortable psychological distance. The building serves as a proxy, allowing you to contemplate endings without directly facing your own. Strangely enough, this experience can feel oddly comforting to many people. It provides perspective that makes everyday worries and anxieties feel smaller and less significant. The stress about deadlines, relationships, finances, all of it shrinks when placed against the backdrop of inevitable decay. Time becomes the dominant force again, putting human concerns back into their proper cosmic proportion. But that calm, philosophical feeling doesn't last forever. Something else begins to emerge. Section 3. When familiar feels wrong. Hotels occupy what psychologists and anthropologists call liminal spaces, transitional environments meant specifically for passing through rather than permanently inhabiting. Hallways connecting rooms, staircases between floors, lobbies serving as gathering points. These spaces exist in a strange category between public and private, between home and away. When a hotel is operating normally and full of guests, this liminal quality makes perfect sense. Your brain accepts the temporary nature of these spaces because they're filled with appropriate context, sounds of conversation, movement of staff and guests, signs of active life unfolding. When that same hotel becomes completely empty, your brain enters a state of profound confusion. This creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable mental state that occurs when your mind struggles desperately to understand or reconcile something that fundamentally shouldn't exist, according to your understanding of how the world works. A hotel corridor should naturally contain ambient sound, distant conversations, footsteps on carpet, the hum of ice machines, doors opening and closing, luggage wheels rolling. It should have movement, housekeeping carts, guests coming and going, staff performing their duties. It should pulse with life in some form. When all those expected signals are completely missing, the resulting silence feels profoundly unnatural and threatening. The absence becomes a presence of its own. Sigmund Freud developed a specific term for this disturbing feeling, the uncanny, something that appears familiar on the surface, but feels deeply, inexplicably wrong at an instinctual level. At precisely this point in the experience, a small but powerful part of your brain activates the amygdala. This almond-shaped cluster of neurons controls fear responses and survival instincts. It evolved over millions of years to keep our ancestors alive by detecting threats. Now, standing in this abandoned corridor, it begins urgently asking questions that demand answers. Why is absolutely no one here? What caused everyone to leave so suddenly? Could the same threat still be present? In this moment, the building itself transforms psychologically, from a passive structure into something that feels actively threatening. The architecture becomes an antagonist. Section 4. The emotional echo. Now we return to the suitcase. Personal objects change everything. They trigger a feeling known as sunder, the realization that every stranger has a life as complex as your own. A pair of shoes, a postcard, a child's drawing. These aren't objects. They are interrupted lives. In a factory, we see machines. In a hotel, we see ourselves. That intimacy makes abandonment feel like a violation, and that is why we can't look away. An abandoned hotel is more than a ruin. It is a psychological mirror, a museum without curators. It reminds us that time always wins, and that one day, every guest checks out. The building remains quietly telling the story. So let me ask you, if you found an open suitcase in an abandoned room, would you open it? Or would you leave the mystery untouched?